You are listening to Women's Running Stories, where exceptional women runners share inspirational stories about their running experiences.
For so long, I've been like, oh, I can't wait till I get to say I'm Olympian Dakotah Lindwurm. And then when I made the team, of course, I was like, I'm so close. I feel like for me, you have to actually make it to the playing field before you can call yourself an Olympian, not just qualify. So I've been looking forward to, starting the race, taking that first step just so I could officially introduce myself that way. I am Dakotah Lindwurm. I am a 2024 Olympian, and I run for Minnesota Distance Elite and Puma.
Oh, yes, this episode features Olympian Dakotah Lindwurm. This is a title that Dakotah just earned at the 2024 Paris Games. And you are going to hear the story of how this was a childhood dream that came to fruition, but not at all in the way that Dakotah imagined it those many, many years ago. But before we hear more from Dakotah, I want to welcome you to Women's Running Stories. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of this podcast, and I am really excited that you are here. Dakotah's story is exceptional. I do want to mention up top here another podcast that I know you will love, and that is Unexpected Curves, hosted and produced by Olympian and professional runner Mariel Hall. This podcast is the weekly sports show that gives the girls some support. Every week, the show dives into a new topic that has to do with the culture surrounding women in sport. And to do that, Mariel talks to athletes and experts to learn how their work impacts our world of play. Mariel takes a lot of left turns to get to the right answers. Said another way, this show definitely lives up to its name of delivering content that is unexpected. Mariel has explored topics like topography in track and field and discussing if stadiums are sexist. She has a truly unique way of approaching women's sports, and she has great guests. She is also a thoughtful, terrific interviewer. I really love this show, and I look forward every week to what topic Mariel is going to cover and how she's going to approach it. So check out Unexpected Curves. Look to the show notes for links to how you can find the show. All right, now let's get into this episode. Dakotah Lindwurm is a 29-year-old marathoner, and she does race for the Minnesota Distance Elite team. She is sponsored by Puma, and she is coached by Chris Lundstrom. A few things to know before we dive in. The selection process for the U.S. Women's Olympic Marathon team is very straightforward. The first 3 runners who cross the line at the Olympic Trials Marathon make the team. That's it. That race took place back on February 3rd of 2024 in Orlando, Florida. And then at the Olympics, the women's marathon took place on the very last day of the Games, August 11th. This is all to say that for the women racing the marathon, the whole process of competing in the Olympics is a very, very long journey. As a point of comparison, the other runners at the Olympics, the track athletes, had their trials at the end of June, and their competitions started on August 1st. Now back to Dakotah's Olympic story. Looking back at the marathon trials in February, when Dakotah lined up, she was certainly on people's radar as having a shot at the team, but she was seen more as a strong underdog than a favorite. By the numbers comparing personal best marathon times coming into the trials, Dakotah was the 10th fastest competitor, and she had come into professional marathon running in a way that was a little different from a lot of her competitors. Most notably, she had not been a standout collegiate athlete. But over the years, she's also shown herself to be a racer who should never be counted out. She is someone who knows how to put her head down and grind, steady and strong, all the way to the finish. Dakotah Lindwurm does not give up. But it might be easy to overlook these tougher, grittier qualities of Dakotah as a competitor because she always just looks like she's having such a blast when she runs. She has that confounding ability to make something very, very difficult look delightfully fun.
I guess if anybody's ever watched me race, I think those lines of I'm competing and I'm enjoying this are very blurred for me. When I'm running, I am smiling, I'm interacting with the crowd. I am really enjoying it. And that does not mean that I'm not serious. It doesn't mean I'm not competing and thinking to myself, like, ooh, I can't wait to pass her. I can't wait to beat her. I'm doing both very simultaneously. But I guess I'm a very joyful runner and I love competing. So I think both of those emotions really come out at the same time for me.
So yeah, that smile, that joyful demeanor can be deceiving if you take it to mean that Dakotah isn't deeply serious about being a competitor. And one person who has always been clear about how passionately competitive Dakotah Lindwurm is Dakotah herself. She's had a profound belief since childhood that competing at the highest level of sport is her calling. And that is where the story is going to begin, with the moment that sparked Dakotah's Olympic dream. So let's get to it. Here to tell her Olympic marathon story is Dakotah Lindwurm.
When the movie Miracle on Ice came out about the 1980 Olympic hockey team, my dad made me watch it. Not made me, I suppose. I was excited to watch it. I was a goalie growing up, played hockey from Minnesota, which is what most of the team is made of. And I watched the moment that Jim Craig is holding the American flag on his shoulders after they had just beat the USSR, and he's looking up in the crowd for his dad to like celebrate with him. And there was something about that moment that it's burned in my memory forever. I can forever picture that cinematic moment that I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to be. That's what I was put on this earth to do. Playing hockey, from that moment, I was like, I'm going to be an Olympic goalie. Honestly, I thought for a while before there was a women's professional league, I was like, I'm going to be in the NHL. I'll be the first woman to be in the NHL. As I got older into high school and I started to fall in love with running, I think that dream just kind of subsided, and I fell in love with running so deeply, and unfortunately wasn't super amazing at running. So my Olympic spark with it wasn't necessarily there as strongly, I guess, as it was with hockey. But as I got into college, my freshman year, even though I was a Division II walk-on, a very unlikely Olympic hopeful, I was in my freshman dorm with my high school best friend, and we were talking about life and, just having that kind of those intimate moments right before bed when it's dark and you can't see each other. And we were talking about our dreams, and I told her, you can't tell anybody this, but I want to be an Olympian in running. Even though I was a Division II walk-on, even though I was like not the best on my team, I was still harboring that hope for sure. I was still so naive. I wanted that dream. I held on to that dream tightly, but I had no path to get there. I had no idea about like the Olympic trials. I didn't know, what the qualifying standards were. I was very naive and in the dark, but for some reason still holding on to that dream. If you could fast forward from that freshman year in the dark, telling my best friend I wanted to be an Olympian and having no idea how to get there, to February, I'm a whole different person. Obviously, I have so much more knowledge. I was going into what I think is my 14th marathon at the Olympic trials, and it no longer felt like this shot in the dark or like this thing that I wanted but didn't know how to get.
Dakotah, in fact, brought years of marathon experience with her to the line in Orlando, starting with her very first marathon in 2019, where she had placed fourth and run fast enough to qualify for the 2020 U.S. Olympic trials. At those trials, she placed 36th. And she continued making steady progress, getting faster, and racing nationally and internationally competitive events like the Chicago and Boston marathons. And she was learning valuable lessons all along the way.
If I could go back to like my first few marathons, I felt like my life was riding on my performance. And I probably was just putting way too much weight on the outcome of every race. And when you do that, you put this just incredibly undue pressure on yourself. And I think it makes it really, really difficult to show up on race day and perform to the best of your ability, because you almost feel like you're in a fight or flight mode. If you don't perform well, your whole world's going to crash in on you. And that just doesn't lead to a healthy athlete. It doesn't lead to a healthy mindset. And after, years and years of marathoning, I've come to learn that when I win, everybody loves me who, is in my circle. And when I have a bad day, everybody still loves me. And I have so many great blessings in my life outside of running, whether I never became an Olympian or I won a gold medal. I think I've got the best support system and people who keep me really grounded and remind me so often that they love me for so many more reasons than whether or not I'm an Olympian. So I think just going into the trials, I felt very calm. It was like, if I make this team, amazing. And if I don't, I'm going to go celebrate with my family anyway.
That unwavering support from family has been a foundation in Dakotah's life her whole life, even through really rough periods, in particular after her parents divorced when she was 10 and her mother experienced debilitating health issues that took years to diagnose. This led to periods of instability, of she and her mother moving around and sometimes even sleeping in their car. And this was all unbeknownst to her father. When he did learn about this, Dakotah's father was able to bring the family together under one roof. This was a time of Dakotah's life that left a strong impact.
Having those hard times as a child made me very resilient. And, I think a lot of people, maybe didn't have it nearly as quite as bad as me, but we all go through hard things when we're young, and it can either make or break you. And I'm so grateful to have had parents who were so supportive, doing the best that they could and trying to get us out of a really hard situation, because I also looked towards them and I saw how hard they were constantly trying every single day to make our situation better. And I think that they were showing me resilience without even knowing it, for sure, and created this example that when things are hard, we just keep putting one foot in front of the other and we get out of it. So when things are hard in a marathon, I just keep putting one foot in front of the other until I'm out of it. And I mean, those life lessons are huge, and it's made me the hard worker that I am today, for sure. My parents have always been just so gung-ho with whatever I thought I could do. They were like, yep, you for sure can do it. And never set any limits, or never cautioned me to, lower my expectations or my dreams. When I, graduated college and decided, I'm going to give this Olympic dream a shot or try to make it as a professional runner, my dad was just so on board right away and never ever wavered in front of me, of course. But I listened to him do an interview with a cameraman who is putting together a little documentary about Annie Frisbee and I, and the interviewer asked if he was confident I was always going to make it as a professional runner, and he was like, heck no. He realizes how few people make an actual living out of this, and how the odds really have to be in your favor and everything has to come together on the right days. He hardly knows anything about running, but he understands that it's a very small few that get to do this. And what I thought, I remember my jaw hitting the floor, because what I thought was so amazing about that is I've never heard that. I've never felt him waver. I've never felt him, wonder if I was going to make it or not. It's always been 100%. So even though in his head he was, maybe questioning it a little bit, he's never shown that to me. And I think that's what makes both of my parents so amazing, is that, I think they were always there to catch me if I fell, but they were never going to question anything I was doing. And if I would have failed, they would have been there to help me get back up. But in a recent interview, actually an interview he did right before the Olympic trials, the same interviewer asked if my dad thought I was going to make the team, and he said, "Well, yeah. I mean, clearly she just does anything she sets her mind to." So that support is so valuable. And I think it's something that so many parents can learn from. And if I ever get the great honor to be a mother, I would definitely try to show to my child that, if they want to be an astronaut, okay, how can I support you to be an astronaut? If you want to be an NFL player, how can I support you to do that? Because I think there's no reason to say, oh, not very many people get to do that, or set limits on your children.
Dakotah fully recognizes how meaningful her family's support is. And now it is just her and her father. In 2020, Dakotah got the awful news that her mother was diagnosed with an aggressive form of lung cancer. She passed away not long after. So coming in to the Olympic trials, even before lining up in February, Dakotah was already thinking ahead to the support she'd want to have in Paris.
I had not just one, but probably 10 conversations with my dad about him getting a passport. He's a small town man, lives up on a little hobby farm. He rarely leaves the state of Minnesota, let alone, I don't think he's ever left the country. So he needed a passport. And I continued to pester him. Every time I'd have a great workout, I'd say, "Dad, I'm going to make this team, and it takes a while to get a passport. Go, just get the process started." And he's got just as much faith in me as I do. He didn't ever submit for a passport before I made it, but he did go to get the paperwork, and he filled out the entire application before the trials, because he could sense my positivity towards making it.
Something to know is that Dakotah's positivity, beyond her outward appearance of being so joyful when she's racing, isn't something that just happened. It's rooted in years of practice going back long before her running days.
I love that my background in hockey actually, I feel like, helps me so much in running, because visualization is so important as a goalie. You have to be able to see yourself stopping a shot before you can actually do it. So I've carried that over into running for my whole entire career. So I've done that forever, that I've walked myself through races. It wasn't ever something that was taught to me in track or in cross country growing up, but more so just, I was like, this works so well for me as a goalie. It has to work for me as a runner also. When I would shut my eyes at night leading up to the trials and that whole build, and I would run through the race, there was no other outcome. I made the team every single time I dreamed about it, and I was standing on the start line in February knowing I could make that team, and I just felt more confidently than ever that I could do it.
Dakotah was confident in her abilities because she had set her mind to it, and she had also put in the training.
I think when it comes to race day, having those dreams and those goals that you've created for yourself can't come from nowhere, I guess. You have to see it in practice to know that it can happen in a race. And my training had gone so well that it wasn't just this confidence of I want this more than everybody else. I dream of this more. I guess I desire it more. It was, I'm working harder for this than anybody else. So the confidence was backed up by hard work. And I think that's why I felt so strongly I could make that team. Everything had gone so well, and some of that comes from luck. My body was responding incredibly well to the training, and I felt like the adaptations were coming together at the right time, which isn't even just from that training block. It's from, the training block before and the training block from 4 years ago. It's all of this stuff that stacked together to come together on the most perfect day and the most perfect build. So, some of it's the confidence, some of it's the hard work, and then of course there's luck behind it.
Confidence, hard work, and luck. The three ingredients that need to come together on that one day for just under 2.5 hours to make the Olympic team. And on February 3rd, 2024, Dakotah was ready to do all she could to make sure that that happened for her. It was a warm, sunny day in Orlando, and at 10:20 a.m., the gun went off, and Dakotah, along with 136 of the other top American marathoners, set off to determine who would earn those 3 coveted spots.
As the race started, the plan that me and my coach had created was that I would stay unseen and unheard as long as possible. I have a tendency to like to take the lead in races. I'm just not like the world's greatest pack runner, I would say. So often I feel like almost claustrophobic and want to take the lead, which ends up costing me energy, certainly. So my plan was just to be as calm as possible and do as little work as possible, which really kind of came to fruition at a moment where I took the lead, but fell back in. And then somewhere around, I believe, like 18 miles, the pack got broken up quite a bit, and Fiona and Emily broke away, and a handful of women went with them, and I just felt like it was too fast for me, and I didn't think that I could hold it, so I played it smart, and that's exactly what my coach had predicted would happen, that there would be a big move and too many women would go who couldn't handle it, and they would pay the price later. So I was just hoping that was going to come true, and I just stayed consistent. And then eventually ended up catching back up to, Sarah Hall, Betsy Sena, some of the best women in the country, and I was almost starstruck as I passed them. And then finally, everybody faded away, and I started to hear, like 6 seconds back, 12 seconds back, and that's when I started to realize, like, I'm making this team right now. And I continued to try to just push that thought out of my head, because you never want to celebrate too soon. And at that point, I think I was still at like 24 miles. I still had plenty of work to do. And I saw one of my teammates out on the course. She flew down to support us, and she just reminded me, like, you worked so hard for this, pour everything into this moment. And I just tried to push out every thought about what was exactly happening and just tried to pour every ounce of energy into moving as quickly as I could. And rounding that last final turn, I think we had like 600 meters to go after the final right, and I was still in position to make the team. And I was running a little scared. I had no idea how far behind the next woman was, and I was like stuck in this moment of enjoy every second. And also, this is the longest 600 meters of my life. Every time I would look up, it felt like the line was no closer. And so I was just trying to keep my head down. And then in those final moments, really allowed myself to soak it in. And you can see me like touch my head and say, like, is this really happening? I felt so surprised and also so much relief.
Dakotah had done it. She had made the 2024 Olympic team going to Paris, along with trials winner Fiona O'Keefe and current U.S. record holder in the marathon, Emily Sisson, who came in second.
Going from the trials to the Olympics was such a switch, just outside of, like, obviously, like, the fact that beforehand you're not Olympian and then after you are. But like, there was so much change in my life happening, of like being pulled in so many different directions, people wanting to tell my stories here and there. And genuinely, I'm a yes man. Like, if somebody asks something of me, I say yes, and then I think about how I'm going to figure that out later. And so I think I was, again, just surrounded by such incredible people who helped me discern like what is necessary and what is something that I can put on the back burner for right now. And having that support system really helped me, prepare for the Olympics, because I wanted to go to Paris knowing that I had done the very best preparation that I could. And it became very evident quickly that being pulled in a million directions wasn't a good conduit of being able to do all those, being able to train well. So having, an agent and a support system to help me say no in when I needed to was important. And then I'm super lucky to have an amazing coach who kind of does all the thinking training wise for me. Of course, I give my input and he listens to how I'm feeling, but he is a mastermind, and I trust him completely with my training. So I'm super lucky that he kind of took the reins on that. Training didn't change too much going into the Olympics, just because what we've been doing has clearly been working. But of course, with the hills in Paris, we prepared slightly differently compared to the flat Orlando course.
Well, Dakotah's training changed to meet the demands of the course she'd be racing at the Olympics. She was very clear on why her training wouldn't deviate too much from what she'd already been doing. And as it turned out, that approach would result in a few PR performances along the way.
I think on a very real level, obviously it's much more exciting to be training for the Olympics over, training for a world major marathon or, a grandma's marathon, whatever. But I was really trying to and forcing myself to say, like, this is any other marathon buildup. We're not going to overhype this. We're not going to be pushing every single boundary every single day, because the most important thing at the Olympics is showing up healthy, because there are going to be many, many women who overtrain because it is such a big event that they're trying to push every boundary to be the most fit on that day. And at the end of the day, a lot of the times being, undercooked is better than being overcooked in a marathon. So I was forcing myself to be very, very mindful of how I was thinking about race day, for sure. And I think the PRs along the way in my build were super exciting. And I definitely had more confidence on every starting line, saying like, okay, when I look left and right, I've beat a lot of these women before, and I did it at the highest stage up to that point in my career. And I think up until the Olympic trials, I've always felt like the underdog, like the person that nobody really worries about, but is still there quietly doing well. But now post Olympic trials, I feel like I'm going to have eyes set on me. People are going to be a little bit more worried about me. And I kind of like that approach, because I've had this like a little bit of a chip on my shoulder for all of my career, trying to say like, here, I'm trying to prove myself over and over and again. And a lot of people aren't recognizing the hard work or the success that I'm having. But now it's a little bit more undeniable.
No doubt. Heading into the Olympics, Dakotah made sure that she was prepared to bring her A game. Her training had gone very, very well, and she set herself up to make sure she'd be able to give her best on race day.
My now fiance and I went out to Paris 3 weeks before the marathon. I wanted to be there for opening ceremonies, and I wanted to be confident that I was completely on Paris time zone. And I really enjoyed being there for like 2 weeks, I would say. And then once track started, that's when I started to feel like, okay, when is it going to finally be race time? Because it's one thing to be watching like beach volleyball or badminton and being like, oh, this is just really cool to watch. But then there's a whole nother thing for me to be watching running events and feeling so much more connected to that. So that's kind of when I started to feel a little bit impatient, because it's like I'm watching the thing that I'm doing basically, and I just have to wait a whole nother week. So I also thought it was ironic that as marathoners, we're the first to qualify, but we're the last to compete. So I'm watching all of these people who had just qualified on the track, like I don't know, 5 weeks earlier. And they get to rip the Band-Aid off, and they're now celebrating in Paris, and I am still so nervous, and I don't get to, like, enjoy the city the same way, I guess, as I would if I wasn't competing so late, but, it was nice to be there and totally be, acclimated to everything that Paris is in all the ways that it's different than America, I guess, so, I think it did help me, but, of course, I was kind of, like, biting my nails, like, ready to just go by the time track had started.
Dakotah was getting antsy, biding her time as calmly as she could while she waited for her turn to compete. And during that time, she got a bit of last-minute inspiration from a very unexpected source. Remember how, as a young hockey goalie, Dakotah had watched Miracle on Ice, and in the movie there was that moment?
I watched the moment that Jim Craig is holding the American flag on his shoulders after they had just beat the USSR.
And it was that scene that had first sparked Dakotah's Olympic dreams. That was something Dakotah had never forgotten. And it was not news to those around her that Jim Craig was Dakotah's inspiration to be an Olympian. One of the people who knew this fact was a man named Todd Gardner, who also knows Jim Craig. And Todd was in Paris to watch the Olympics. And on one of those final days leading up to the marathon, Dakotah was enjoying some social time. Todd was there, as well as members of the men's marathon team and their family members.
And all of a sudden, Todd grabs his phone and goes, "Oh, I've got another goalie for you to talk to," or something like that. And Jim Craig was on FaceTime, and I immediately broke out into a sweat. I was so starstruck and so nervous to talk to him. But the first thing I said is, "You're the reason I wanted to be an Olympian," and I'm just gonna cry thinking about it. He just asked me how it was feeling going into the Olympics, obviously a feeling that he had also, and I just had mentioned that, of course, I was starting to get a little nervous, started, just feeling like getting a little bit of that anxiousness, and he just gave me an amazing speech about how, like, when you basically how I went into the trials, when you close your eyes, just imagine yourself succeeding every single time, whatever that means to you. So he just really motivated me so much, and, just reminded me that all the hard work was done. And at that point, all you can do is just show up confident and have the best day.
Dakotah was ready to get to the line. She'd had those inspiring words from the person who had sparked this whole Olympic dream to begin with. She had the confidence of the months of great training leading up to the Olympics. She had the support of her family and friends, and she was going in with her years of marathon experience.
I think I'm just so lucky that I am at this point. So I don't want to say late in my career, but like later in my marathoning career, because if this had been my fourth marathon ever, I'm sure that I would have let my nerves get to me. But being that it was my 15th, I'm so much better at kind of separating myself from what type of stage I'm on. And it's like, okay, I'm here to do my job. I've prepared so well for this. I've done everything that I could. There's nothing, and there's no reason to look back and think, oh, I wish I had gone better. I wish, that workout had gone better, or look left and right and say, oh, I don't belong here. These women are better than me. I've just been in so many different scenarios at this point where it's like, brain off, you've done the work. The marathon is just such a fickle beast that you don't know what's going to happen. I can't look up at Helen O'Beary or Asefa and think, oh, these women are so much better than me and there's no way I can beat them. The marathon's insane, and you never know what's going to happen.
You never know what's going to happen in a marathon, so you make your best guess based on the information that you have. And one very important piece of information in Paris was the course description. The marathon was hilly, which many people believed would slow the race down.
We were super lucky to get to watch the men run the day before, because I think that kind of told the tale of how the race was going to play out a little bit. They ran super fast, which was super surprising to, I think, everybody. So my plan was that if the race was going out any slower than like 5:35 to 5:40 pace, that I would just kind of do my own thing and, probably run closer to 5:30s where I'm more comfortable. A lot of those international women, they like to race like fartlek style or yo-yo style, which means they like surge, they slow down, they surge, they slow down, which isn't how I like to race. I consider myself more of a Des Linden, kind of like I like to hold on to one pace and run it the entire marathon. So that was my intention going into it, was just pretty much worry about myself. And if I could stick with the leaders for as long as possible, that would be great.
And with that, Dakotah Lindwurm was ready to take on the biggest event of her life. The day that Dakotah could finally step over that start line and officially call herself an Olympian had arrived. And it started early.
I slept in the Airbnb the night before, so I had to Uber to the village so that I could get on like the athlete bus to go to the start line. So the morning was so long, and as I'm like walking into the village, all these athletes are coming in their high heels and their skirts because they'd been all out all night. They're coming back at like 4:30 a.m. as I'm just about to go compete, which I just thought was so funny and ironic. And then I finally got in the village and was with Emily and Fiona, and you can always sense the nerves of everybody else, and obviously we're all kind of like buzzing with excitement and anxiousness, and unfortunately, we had known that Fiona was not at 100%, and we were aware that it wasn't going to be, it was unlikely that it would be the day that she wanted. So Emily and I warmed up together, and I kind of let her know my race plan. She let me know hers, and I think it's fun because the marathon is very rarely a team event. Like if my true teammate on MDs, Annie Frisbee, if she's in a race, I'm always gonna be there to help her out. But that's one person, and it's pretty rare that we're in a race together. But to know that Emily was in the field, and I saw her many times during the race, it's cool because it's like, okay, this is somebody who's on my side and wants the best for me, and I want the best for her.
Dakotah had that boost of support in the race from her teammate Emily Sisson as the field made its way along this challenging course. Notably, there were two major climbs, one at about 10 miles and the other around the 18-mile mark, and they set the tone for how the race played out.
Yeah, there were two like very obvious hills. The first was very long and not nearly as steep. And I felt so well prepared for that one that as I was climbing it, I was kind of like, it's fine. It's slowing me down, but it's whatever. Like I felt so strong on it still. And I actually, right before that hill had been dropped by the lead pack, and then caught them and then passed them on that first long hill. And I just felt really, really good and prepared for that. And then the second hill, which they called the wall, and if you watched it, it was so apparent how steep it was. Like that was incredibly difficult, and never in my life have I really felt a burn in my legs that way, and felt like I almost needed to put my hands on my knees to get up a hill during a race. That felt like a completely new experience for me. But there were so many like people there. I feel like the crowd knew that we were going to need support on that hill, and they really came out so that it gave me something to think of other than the fact that it felt like my quads were going to fall off. So what goes up has to come down, unfortunately. And normally you would look at a downhill and think, oh, it's a moment to recover. It's a moment to maybe make up some time that you lost going up the hill. But this downhill specifically was so steep that it actually felt like dangerous, and like you couldn't really like let your muscles recover. It certainly was a recovery, like aerobically. I think I actually ran like a 4:55 mile down that hill, which is insane for me in a marathon. But it was me just praying that my quads would catch me every time I put my foot down, and my calf was cramping as I was going down the hill. So if I let my foot land naturally how I would want to, I could feel my calf just kind of like seize up for a second. So I was running a little wonky getting down the hill, but at that point, you're at like between 30 and 35K, and it's just like, who cares how your legs feel? You just got to keep going. But I was just praying to stay on my feet because it was so steep downhill. Coming off that last downhill, there were women ahead of me, and I kind of went back and forth with a few of them. I had the biggest regret I think I have is I had no idea what position I was in. I was pretty confident I wasn't in the top 10, but I didn't know if I was in 11th or if I was in 17th. So I had no idea what I was fighting for, I guess. And because of that, I don't know if anything would have changed, even if I had known I was sitting in 12th. But, I do wish I had known that I was so close to 10th. Because when you don't really know what you're fighting for, sometimes it's easy to like let your mind go and just say, like, just get to the finish. Let's just try to maintain. I was super lucky to have a young boy who was dressed in like all-American flags, and he was cheering my name, and he ran with me for a little bit on the sidelines, and he really inspired me to like keep my head in it, fight for every position. And then as I was in those last few kilometers, I passed Perez Jepchicher, who was the reigning Olympic champion from 2021. And I kind of thought to myself, like, okay, if this course broke her, I think I can be proud of whatever position I'm about to come in. And, I rounded that final right, and you're literally in this almost an outdoor stadium. They put up so many bleachers and they were full, and the crowd was so deafening, and I just wanted to appreciate like the last 100 meters. And I had no idea that I was pretty close to 10th, but I just finished with a grateful heart, and just wanted to look back at that moment and say, like, I enjoyed my finish, because at that point, like when I crossed that finish line, I felt like I could be proud of the race I put forth and forever get to call myself an Olympian.
Dakotah Lindwurm is, and forever will be, an Olympian. She finished the Olympic marathon in 2 hours, 26 minutes, and 44 seconds, coming in 12th overall and first American. And with that, there's one clear truth that emerges. Dakotah Lindwurm is no longer an underdog. Nor is she eager to take a break. She's already announced that she'll be racing in the New York City Marathon on November 3rd.
I know a lot of people go through that like post-Olympic sadness or depression. And I certainly can relate to it, thinking like, oh, I've got to wait 4 more years until I can try that again. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think that I don't think all my dreams have come true in this sport. So I have so much more to look forward to. I've never been top 10 at a world major. So going into New York this fall, I've got my eyes set on that. I would love to win a world major marathon. Like, there's so many things to be excited about still. And I'm so young for a marathoner that I've got all this time to do it. So I don't know. I guess I just have so many more things I want to do and a lot of time to do it. So there's no reason to feel like that let down for me. And now going forward, I feel like I've got a lot of confidence, and I think I've just got a really healthy relationship with this sport where, if being 12th in the Olympics was the pinnacle of my career, I'm always going to be able to look back and be happy with that. My worth doesn't ride on, what other things I do in this sport at all. So I think going forward, I can only see me using this as something that strengthens me. I don't think it will add extra pressure or, I think it won't add extra expectation to me as I go forward into other marathons. I think it will only be like a superpower I have in my back pocket.
The Olympics has given Dakotah Lindwurm a superpower, and I, for one, am very excited to see what she does with it. And that does bring me to the end of Dakotah Lindwurm's Olympic Dream story on the podcast. I want to thank Dakotah so much for coming on the podcast and sharing her story. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Dakotah. And I wish Dakotah Lindwurm all the very best in New York and whatever else she chooses to do next. That is going to do it for me. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of Women's Running Stories. Thank you so much for being here. I always appreciate you listening. And until next Tuesday, I do wish you healthy, joyful strides forward. Women's Running. Women's Running Stories.
Hear Her Sports is a podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women striving to improve and make a difference in their lives. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery, a former professional cyclist. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in the business of sport through a thoughtful conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. My guests and I explore the glorious and frustrating issues in sports, history, equity, training, nutrition, and so much more. Join us for inspiration, for community, and for love of being a strong, athletic woman.